think this is a story in which the Bible does what it does best, which is that it purposely is ambiguous to invite you in to wrestle with the stuff. So I think that wrestling is inherently religious and inherently about what's the
Meaning the
relationship.
readers or the
Yeah,
interpreters.
yeah. It's pulling you in exactly the way you started off the conversation. What do we make of this? What are we supposed to do about that? And what does it even mean to say, who is this Ezer Kenegdo? And what we haven't mentioned also, Gabriel, is the fact that this is not the only creation story in Genesis, which is that the other creation story is a completely different story.
The first chapter of the Bible.
Right. The
Yeah.
first chapter of the Bible, which we don't have Eve created out of Adam's body, and we don't have this whole naming of the animals, and we don't have this whole counterpart help me whatever situation going on there. It's a different story. And what is going on with that, right? What are we supposed to understand from those two stories? And does that story affect how we're supposed to read this story? Which I would say yes, that story affects how you're supposed to understand this story. And I think the rabbis also they also would say, like, well, given what it says in the first story, how can we understand this second story? What's going on there? Or are they two different stories? And if they're two different stories, what's the point of those two different stories?
Yes.
Sorry, it looked like you have a question.
No, I mean, that's like a huge issue for, I mean, because Genesis is the first book of the Bible, this is where people start, and, they read Genesis 1, and it's just, I mean, I guess up to, does that story sort of go up to the first few verses of Genesis 2, whatever, and then they read the next story in the garden, and it's like, so different.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the difference is what people might call sort of like the mythical or the storytelling quality of the garden episode, Genesis 2 and 3. I mean, and maybe the best example of that is a talking snake.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people I think are kind of, I don't dulled to the shocking nature
Yeah.
that you have an animal that's talking.
Yeah.
This
He's not the
story,
only animal that talks in the Bible, which is interesting, but
I guess
there's a
so. Yeah, there's
there's a
a donkey.
donkey.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was thinking of the donkey.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
and in the
donkey.
Quran, ants talk.
Yeah. I love those ants. They're very
In the
cute.
story of Solomon, there's probably
Yeah.
some others that I'm not thinking of right now, but definitely the ants talk. Yeah, I mean, so I mean, what's going on here? Why is there a snake that's talking in the Quran? It's not a snake, it's Satan, which maybe we could speak about the difference, but yeah, why do we have this talking snake?
Yeah. So yeah. Why do we have a talking snake? And also, if you look at the description of the talking snake, he's called in Hebrew Arum, that it's often translated as the most crafty or shrewdest. And if you look at his punishment in the Bible, in the punishment is not, what I find fascinating, not that the snake won't talk anymore, because it's his talking that causes the problem, right? It's that the
So that
snake.
would be kind of a logical punishment would be
Yeah,
solve the
logical punishment would
problem.
be like, God comes in and says snakes can't talk anymore because look what they do. But instead, what God says is they're going to lose their hands and feet. So it looks like this original snake was like some sort of lizard with feet, hands and feet, and
Which you
or
find in Islamic traditions too, by the way, that bring in the snake. Anyway,
yeah,
yeah. His
yeah,
feet were longer than a camel, or his legs were longer than a camel's, I think some of the
yeah.
Islamic traditions say.
So this, he loses that, and he also like has to eat dust, like lick the dust, which is, I think, clearly an image of sort of like the tongue darting in and out of a. But he doesn't lose his power of speech. Okay, so then we have to ask why. That doesn't make any, like, it. You would think that it should. And what does it mean to be that he's the most crafty? And why is he involved? And this word arum, again, when you read it in English, I find this a lot with the early stories of Genesis, that they're told as if they're children's stories, that we're so used to them, as you're saying, that like we get these little children's stories and they're super complicated. Like they're not children's stories. The whole Noah's Ark, which is a children's story frequently, is also super complicated in the Bible. So one of the things that happens is, what does it mean to say that this nachash, which is the Hebrew word there,
For the
is
snake.
for snake,
Mhm.
is arum, And the word arum is also the same word in Hebrew. It's the same consonants for arum, which is naked.
Mhm.
So, and we know that there's a nakedness thing that happens in the story, right? That they discover that they're naked,
Mhm.
not that they discover that they're crafty.
Mhm.
So it looks like the text is playing on these words, right? That this snake, which is arum, leads to them understanding that they are arom, which I think is really an interesting parallel. But there's also a rabbinic text that says that the snake, this is kind of gross, but the snake was watching Adam and Eve in the garden, who were naked and having sex with each other. And he developed a lust for, because the question the rabbis are asking is, what does the snake get out of this? Why does he insert himself into the story?
Yes.
What is this craftiness? And is this
Yes.
craftiness related to nakedness? Why is this the word that's used to describe him? So the idea was that he fell in lust with Eve,
Mhm.
say the rabbis, and he thought if he could cause a wedge in this relationship, he could get Eve as well. Doesn't work, but that was his. That's why he inserts himself
Yeah.
into this story. But I think it's also maybe not coincidental that a snake is it's kind of a phallic image also, right? This idea of this snake. So this snake, which is naked and in love or in lust with Eve, that's watching them have sex and then wants to get involved.
Wow. We
Yeah,
are, yeah, this
crazy.
is, we're
It's
pushing
like
back the boundaries of uh, exploring the Quran and the Bible. This is, yes,
yeah, that's why I feel
this
like
is
it's
a
a lot.
milestone. And yeah.
There's, there's a lot going on in these stories,
Now, I
and
mean, is it okay if I jump in with a question about
sure,
the Quran just to for a point of comparison? Because I mean, in some ways, the Quran seems to solve this problem by well, first of all, the snake's not there at all. It's
right,
just, a shaitan. So, Satan coming from the Hebrew word for Satan, which we could, I guess, speak about too, maybe at some point. But I mean, the reason why Satan in the Quranic episodes on the garden wants to cause trouble is because the man, I mean, it seems pretty clear. I don't think no, it is said explicitly because there's this bit about anyway, the man has caused his downfall from heaven when God commanded all the angels to bow down
right,
to the man. And obviously, the devil does not, and then he's cast out of the heaven or the highest heaven. So the whole thing is an act of revenge against, the causing Adam to slip from the garden, I guess, with the Arabic verb. It's an act of revenge. So it's kind of like, it solves a problem, or maybe makes less ambiguous what is ambiguous with the snake in Genesis.
yeah. Well, yeah, I think that it gets a lot of that information from Christianity, but the Quran
Yes,
um,
yes, yeah, it's
has,
there in
that
early Christian text. Yeah.
right. The whole replacement of the snake with shaitan
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
um, not in the rabbinic texts or not in the biblical text, right? Satan doesn't come into the Hebrew Bible until like way, way, way further
Yeah,
on.
but
And
don't the rabbis? There's another name there I'm not thinking of right now that's connected with the devil somehow and identified with a snake in later Jewish texts. No,
um,
Samuel or something like that.
Samael, right?
Samael.
Samael, right? Samael is he's supposed to be an angel,
Okay.
but it's because Judaism goes through some changes, right? The Jewish text, like there's a lot of different groups.
Hmm.
There's there's no real concept of, which we do find in this story in the Quran and also in Christian sources, there's no real concept that Satan was an angel who fell from heaven. That Sorry, let me back that up. I think that story comes from Enoch, from the book of Enoch, which
Okay.
is actually a Jewish source in
Okay.
its core. And so to say that Judaism doesn't have that concept is a little inaccurate because I think it goes back, if I remember correctly, to 3 Enoch.
Okay.
But 3 Enoch is not accepted into the canonical
Hebrew
um
Bible.
Hebrew Bible or rabbinic texts, right?
Oh,
It's not.
even in kind
Yeah,
of like the library of
right.
authoritative
Yeah,
resources for the rabbis.
right.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
3 Enoch is a source that Jews don't know unless they're in academic Jewish studies, right?